Yes. Yep.
Not the usual way I've got for you.
Oh, I noticed that, but you're not uniform.
Yeah, where's Keith? Is Keith coming? I assume he has a watch. Is Keith upstairs or where was he?
Something stupid like that. So I've got some citizen concerns that were sent along by a citizen who wants to be named and have them read. Is that on the budget from Mayor Winkle? Is that all right to do during the budget time or during citizen concerns or either one? Okay. Well, we've got a couple points of information.
Start the meeting. Dennis, would you start with your running total?
Okay, our running total, as of through February 6th, we are currently, we did reduce countywide by 9 cents and reduced the rural basic, which is an unincorporated rural only levy, by 10 cents. We are now have reduced $1,159,076, and that makes our tax rate as of last Tuesday equal or a little bit less than our tax rate we're currently paying on. In a rural area, it's about 50 cents less than what they're paying on right now.
Dennis, sorry, can you define rural areas?
What?
Can you define rural areas when we levy out a rural basic or rural?
Rural basic is all the countywide levies plus the secondary roads levy, which is levied in the rural basic. That is on townships only, which is outside the unincorporated areas.
So no rural towns, correct?
No rural towns are included in the rural basic levy.
Thank you.
So just to give you an idea, I picked up the sheet here. Currently, we're levying $7.41. We are going down as of last Tuesday through the reductions. We are now down to $7.40. In the rural area townships, which is the countywide plus rural basic, we are currently at 1037. We'll be down to 964 pending whatever we do today. So we've gained what we said we're going to do, and we still have all the ways to go yet with items.
Thanks, Dennis. Starting our budget review, any questions for Dennis? Starting our budget review discussion for FY 2019, improvement request, page 7, emergency services.
Gary, I told Gary you really didn't have to come for this. Actually, what this is was a request for $19,900 to upgrade salaries for EMTs and EMTAs. Suggestion, and he's agreeable to this, that we do not include it in our budget this year. As they become EMTAs, we can come back and amend the budget because this is a process going to take a little time. In 2 years, we haven't really had any yet, so it's better to leave it out and tax for it, and then we'll come back if we have to use minimal reserves to cover for 1 year. So the suggestion is do not fund it. And it is not in our budget now.
So just so I understand, when that threshold is crossed from being
EMT to EMTAs.
then that person will automatically be able to realize that
No,
salary?
still come before the board to determine how much would be given at that point in time.
We haven't decided what the rates are going to be yet.
Right, correct. At that point in time, then you can do your comparisons, whatever, Gary can come forward with his comparisons, and the board decides where they go with the raise.
How far
there
is,
is a raise.
how far, do you know how far somebody would be from being an EMT to an EMTA?
Well, actually, if Melissa can answer this, please, aren't they supposed to be EMTAs as we speak? Per the job description?
But because that's not the current case, right? Is there a length of time that I guess I don't have any issue with that. My only thing is if it's not only an incentive, but we also have a plan in the next 2 or 3 months so that if somebody comes forward and says, here I am, I've now crossed this threshold, we're not scrambling to figure out.
Well, first of all, it won't be 2 or 3 or 4 months.
Okay.
Because it's still, there's some time involved, a lot of class hours. I don't remember all the details, but there are a lot of classroom hours, some, what do they call it, clinical type stuff where they're actually riding in the back of an ambulance and such like that. But we are a ways away from it, but.
Okay.
Future hirees will have to be an EMTA. That's right in the job description, but you're going to give a time period, whatever you said, for them to get to be an EMTA. And if they don't reach that period, then there's a problem.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
I suppose you probably should do a motion not to do this improvement, or include this improvement in our budget.
I would move to not include the emergency services improvement request in the FY19 budget.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Ung. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 3-0. Moving on to district health.
Good afternoon. Kevin Green, Director at Swin District Health Department. As I understand what should be in front of you is a proposed for the tax assessing component of our budget, a request in the amount of $2,504,485. One of the items that I did do within this that you should have received also within your homework is the fact of just a memo. It was one of my attempts that over the past few years I've understood it's the complexity of how we do with our funding and the budgeting gets quite confusing as we're talking and using different terminology. So I attempted to kind of give some explanation with that along with the relation of the health fund where that is documented evidence within the Iowa Code. But right now within the budget request that's in front of you, one of the items that we looked at is this includes the anticipated reduction of the health insurance because there's a zero increase of the $25,000. And then also built within this budget is all of their operating expenses, including we're at a 2% cost of living increase. One of the items for the energy costs, we're anticipating for sure about a $12,000 increase. We'll see how that moderates with some of the changes and compatibility of the equipment. We may be anticipating about twice that amount. We're not sure, but at this point in time for the budget, I did build the $12,000 in, and then also takes a look at doing all of our computer upgrades, vehicle replacements for our fleet, and then also this is an ability to be able to use all programs that we currently offer. And so that's kind of where it's at, and I guess I was just interested in any questions you may have or other clarifications I can provide.
My first meeting with District Health was the budget meeting. I did appreciate the recommendation did split out grant-funded programs and tax-funded. Dennis, where did Dennis go? There's Dennis.
Yes, sir.
Did you have any thoughts on the budget? You were in attendance as well.
Actually, it's going to be a $36,674 reduction for what we have in the budget, so that'll be a tax reduction. The reserves, we decided we aren't going to account for the reserves because we have used reserves in the past to lower the tax asking, and they did use some reserves the past 2 years to fund a position that was grant funded. That is not the case anymore. We're satisfied that all grants are being covered without tax dollars. That was a key issue that Jeremy and I both had when Jeremy's on the board, that tax dollars are not used for backfilling grants.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. One of the questions that I had is, thank you for providing the evidence over the last 3 or 4 years that we're not backfilling grants. This is very important and very appreciated. At one point, you had looked at a reorganization effort. Do you mind just updating us? Is that something that is continuing to progress?
Right. One of the items that actually when we took a look at if we maintained a status quo within our organization, we actually would have been a total amount of 2.7 is what it would have been coming. And so what I have gone through and done is doing a reassessment, and we will be looking at a restructuring organization. This takes advantages of 2 long-term staff retiring. One of those has 100% grant funding and redirection of the responsibilities of that, along with a position that's 100% tax dollars. And so what we will be doing is kind of a restructuring where with our new clinic remodel, kind of changing the management pattern at that, we'll be reducing one of our divisions, moving down to a health services as opposed to a nutrition and nursing division. There will be one director over that, and underneath that, then we are kind of replacing with some management staff. In addition to that, one administration, one of the distinct needs, I visited with Melissa with the HR because of the component we have there is a higher reliance and some agreement with them to kind of offset some of the costs they may have related to the services they provide, and moving more towards what I'm looking at for the fiscal, financial, and the business side, and replacing a director back with somewhat a manager level position. And so with that and going through that whole kind of costing is what it would be. That was the ability to reduce the total expenditure by $183,000, which that's what brings it down to the 2529. And then we reduced by the $25,000 anticipated health insurance savings. So that's where we end up with the 2504,485. And that's all included then within these figures.
Well, I'm going to support this today, and just wanted to thank Kevin Green. I see Tyler Brock and recognize Judy Turner and her leadership on the board. It was a pleasure serving with you as well for that time, and I think they're one of the best kept secrets really in town as far as keeping us healthy, whether it's through immunizations, restaurant inspections, well testing, and all the many things that go on behind the scenes. So thank you very much. And with that, I'd move the budget.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Young to accept the budget, receive it. Is that where we're at yet?
With the reduction of $36,674.
And that's related to the health insurance fund?
That includes health. Yep.
So that would be the 2529 minus the 36?
We had 2541,159 minus 2504,485, so 2504 is what they're going to give you.
Okay, the 2504. Okay, I
Yes.
just wanted to verify the final amount too. Thank you.
Yep.
Questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 4-0.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I'll take that one. All right, 2019 CIP program.
Okay, in this one, you have one in your book, but it did change a little bit, so I gave you new ones with the numbers up in the left-hand or right-hand corner. If you turn the page sideways, you'll see the ones. Kenny can go through them. There's some you may want to keep and some you may want to delete. But the total CIP this next year will be $1,014,000, which includes $150,000 for WIC, as we normally do for equipment upgrades every year, and the city matches that. And the rest of the items are broke down, and Kenny can go through that. And we actually put everything under the Fund 900s. So it would actually start on page, with a courthouse, page 14. And then we did write down what the projects are. Can you go through these and you can delete them or you can leave them? And we can leave them and you can delete them next year because this is a moving target. CIP is always a moving target. We gave the best target we could.
So the item on page 14 is a courthouse. This line item was entered early. I should say earlier in the year. And so this would be for, at that time, the possible security with PJ's PJ's area, and so I'm not certain that funding is necessary on this particular line item, or if it's covered under some of PJ's project or funding allocation in his department. This was originally put on as a line item by me, assuming that we would need project funding for this. Since that time, some things have changed, and I believe PJ plans on funding this.
Through his CAP program, or?
Yes, through whatever funds he has available. Dennis, do you see that as correct?
So are you recommending that we take it out potentially?
We can potentially take this out, yes.
Now, again, the projects we're setting here is for projects for fiscal year 18-19, but we do not borrow the money till May and start paying on this till 19-20. Lawyers borrow, then start paying the past next year. So we have our borrowing as close as we can to our projects to match up.
Do you know currently what our level of funding for FY18 versus FY19 is for CIP?
I believe it's about half of what it is this current year. I think it's around 1.67 million this year, because that includes the sheriff's radios. It's been trimmed back a lot because of intake, not doing that, plus several projects embedded in that. So I think we're down about 1.6 million for fiscal year 18, and next year it's going to be 1.14, and that includes 150,000 for WIC. I have budgeted 1.6 million without that 375 taken out for our debt service levy next year, because we still got 5 months ago, 4.5 months ago, that other CIP projects could come up. If we don't need to borrow the money in May, we won't borrow.
And I guess that's what I'm wondering. Instead of trying to pull back 60,000 here and there, are we looking at, we have so many different building projects concurrently that we've identified as needs. If we pass today that general funding level, those could be either used for other projects, but we don't necessarily need to do them unless we have an identified need. Is that?
That's correct.
Is that just the courthouse? Is this the line item, or is it all maintenance?
What Jeremy's talking about would be about all of our buildings, which are scattered next several pages, with a breakdown of what they comprise of. So like Jeremy's saying, you can pass it today and still not affect your tax asking for next year, but you can adjust it throughout the period for 18-19 where you may have other projects that need done other than these.
How much money does PJ have coming towards the project? Do we know?
I don't. We're actually still in the pricing phase of PJ's project.
Well, you want to reduce it to like $1 million?
I'm comfortable with the status quo of what's being asked, given that if there are certain projects that fall off, for example, that 60,000, then
1.3 then.
Yeah, what is the exact number of the?
1,014,000, and that includes 150,000 for CIP for WIC, which is our computer, which the city does match the same 150,000. So if you take 150 off, you're really talking about 860, 70,000 for CIP projects for all of our buildings next year, which isn't a lot of money, considering the volume of buildings we got.
Sure.
And the age.
And this is similar to what we've done the last several years, the last couple of years. It seems to have worked out well as new projects come on and some unexpected costs come into play.
Where are we at just for the good of the general public and our debt capacity?
We're about 8%, 7 to 8%, and it keeps dropping because we're borrowing less every year, but we're paying off others.
Which is extremely low in comparison to
yes.
counties statewide.
Yes. Our debt capacity is around 327 million. We're at 8 million.
So is that the request then, Kenny, is $1,014,000?
Yes.
I would move CIP funding approval for FY19 in the amount of $1,014,000.
That's what's submitted.
Yes.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Ung. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Carries 4-0.
On the conservation projects, are we looking at MERD grants or any other funding opportunities?
Yeah, we're going to consider going after those two.
Playgrounds just tend to be one of those things people like funding. Yeah.
All the CIP projects are funded right now through Conservation Reserve.
Okay.
We're not
We're not actually
That's why
borrowing
we
it.
set up Conservation Reserve years ago to have funding mechanisms to fund our CIP projects.
All right.
But we do pursue those grants through Merton, Gilchrist, and there's some new grants and everything. We pursue those after.
Okay.
And item 2D, further budget reviews. Final E, Board of Supervisors. 1, approval of utilization of $65,000 in local option tax. Mr. Taylor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is an opportunity to enhance conservation in a way that we have heard has been a long requested need for fiber optic, and can utilize local option sales tax funds to meet this need and an equivalent FTE. So outgoing Director Rick Schneider and new Director Dan Heisel have spoken at length about this need, both for workforce productivity, labor hours efficiency, and believe that this has a direct impact on, well, economic development, quality of life, the booking and enhancing of reservations, and just an overall education effect that's critical in conservation. So this would have savings of $65,000 in local property taxes by utilizing local option sales tax, and the breakdown is $15,000 for a part-time clerk that we identified early on in our budget process and wanted to make sure that we revisit it again, and then $50,000 from fiber for local option sales, from local option sales tax. And so with that, I would move both of those items and ask for the board's support.
Second.
Out of curiosity then, so we just talked about their projects, and then one of those was $110,000 for fiber. Why would that fit? Is this an operating expense for fiber?
Well, this is just the installation of fiber. The $50,000 avoids us from borrowing. They wanted to borrow the board, to borrow $50,000. Instead of doing that, Jeremy's proposing to use $50,000 local option sales tax to avoid borrowing that $50,000.
Okay.
I think the fiber, this is a one-time cost to get in. I'm sure there's some type of maintenance or service fee. Dan might be able to answer that possibly, maybe not. But this is just to get it there.
Sure.
And we'll put up $60,000 out of our reserve fund to reach that $110,000.
Okay.
So that's just for installation, and that we've got all that. That's all been worked out.
Sir?
And easements.
Dan, why don't you come up? Just for, we want to see you closer.
It's kind of scary. No, we're going to put up the $60,000 out of our reserve fund, and the previous director, Rick Schneider, done a lot of groundwork and worked with the railroad museum out there, and they were open to an easement going through that property, which means we wouldn't have to do any boring. So our costs are a lot lower, and I think they're working with, I don't know what company for sure he was working with, but I've been trying to get up to speed on that and work with him. But it's going to save us a lot of downtime.
I just have one request. If you talk to Rick, don't tell him that it took him 40 years and he didn't get it and you only got it in a month. So I want you to rub it in. So.
I'll just tell him that was that honeymoon period.
Yeah.
No, but we thank you for that. I know he was real happy to see that because he thought that this year might be the year it would go with you guys. And so, thank you. Questions?
Any other questions for Dan?
So if we get a MERD grant to provide, say, $50,000 to the playground, can we shift that 50 to cover the fiber optics? And then,
No, because they're using their reserve funds. They aren't using tax dollars.
right.
It wouldn't affect us at all.
But what I'm saying is if they
Unless you
get,
want to use the 50,000 for murder to replace the 50,000 for local option sales tax.
right,
But the motion now is to use the 50,000 local option for now. I suppose if they get the money, it'd be up to the board to say, and their board too, to say, yes, we can take this murder grant and you don't have to give us 50,000 for local option sales tax. Or they may want to divert that 50,000 to other projects they might have.
Either way, I'd support the county's contribution because it has a good impact on quality of life and
Yes. Absolutely.
Motion by Taylor, second by Ung. Any other questions or comments on this? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Carries 4-0. Item 2, approve utilization of $300,000 in gaming revenues in order to provide tax relief.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. This is an opportunity to lower the levy. You saw at the very beginning of our budget presentation that we were at the same levy that we were at last year in general basic, but in rural basic has obviously gone down. But this will be a record 4 years in a row, and we can do so by utilizing gaming revenues in addition to the $1.136 million that's been decreased thus far for FY19. I think this board has done very good work on deauthorizing positions, combining for efficiencies, aligning projections, energy savings, delaying certain projects while forging ahead on certain ones. And so whether in an assessment year or a non-assessment year, we've lowered the levy the last 4 years. And that's had a remarkable impact on going from the second to the sixth highest county in a 27-county, 100-mile area. And so with that, I would move utilizing $300,000 in gaming revenues for tax relief in order to lower the FY19 levy.
I'll second that. Motion by Taylor, second by DeWitt. Any other questions for the topic?
Just a comment, this will leave you approximately about $152,000 in the local option sales tax and the gaming revenue that's unallocated that's available to the board next year. So we aren't using up all of our funds. We still have contingency funds there for projects that might come up throughout the fiscal year in the next 16 months.
this will be evenly apportioned among the different funds.
No, what I planned on doing is just taking out the general basic because it affects all of our countywide funds. So if this does pass, I have another sheet to hand you showing the results.
All right, we're good. Mr. Reddick, anything?
In favor.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Carries 4-0. Yes.
Okay, in somewhat anticipation this could possibly happen today, the only thing I haven't reflected is the 36,000 reduction in district health, which will make minimal effect. But to give you an idea, go down to where it says subtotal countywide levy and then total township levy. We started at our current levy is $7.40. We are now going after this motion you did pass down to $7.32, so we're down about 7 cents countywide. And on our townships, you can see it went from 1036 in bold to 957. So you have dropped 43 plus 36, 79 cents per thousand under rural people. So you more than accomplish what we anticipated to do, which is good. But that's just an update in anticipation you were going to do this.
At this moment.
Yes.
Thank you.
Item 2F, County Sheriff, discussion and action on providing appropriate security for Iowa District Court through judicial.
Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. The courthouse security issue with the lifting of the banning of weapons has brought about some major issues for us, to say the least. Judge Hoffmeyer has come out with a new order, and that order has its difficulties if we lift the ban, because it becomes extremely difficult for us to perform our duties by protecting certain floors with people that have weapons. Though I think your intent was that the law had passed and you saw it as a victory or this or that, what it's going to end up doing is costing us more money. So I would plead with you that you would recognize that the difficulties and the task involved for the sheriff's office to do this job and for the citizens and those that work here. I know I probably, like you, have run into many people at the grocery store and or wherever, and I have not found one person that said that this was a good idea to have guns in the courthouse. And maybe you have found somebody that's different. But we live in a society today where anybody is willing to say anything regardless, and they'll let you know. And so I think people could have came up to me and told me that, that's a dumb idea, Sheriff. We should all be allowed to carry guns. But I didn't find anybody. But I'm sure you will tell me that you may have. But I'm just going to ask you as the sheriff that you help me in this order. Help me to put forth this order that has come down from the courts for the safety and protection of the workers, the jurors, the citizens that have business here. Allowing people to have guns creates a nightmare for everybody because bullets don't know where they go if all of a sudden they're being used. So I give you this little scenario, which I thought it was kind of a good one, was having guns in the courthouse makes about as much sense as if all of a sudden on the first floor atrium we decided that we would start serving alcohol. We'd have a bar because it's the people's beer, just as it's the people's guns. See, that doesn't make a lot of sense. So we shouldn't have alcohol in here, and I don't think we should have guns in here because we have jurors, we have people that are involved in cases that are quite contentious that judges deal with, and trying to make sure people don't enter different floors is nearly impossible. And the only way we can do it is by having more security. It's our attorney's opinion, our opinion, that this judicial order now comes into play, that all buildings are applicable, and that is on page 6. The courthouse, no weapons on 2, 3, 4. That's on page 6. Law Enforcement Center, our take, our attorney's take, and most people that we have talked to with regards to this, is no weapons in the Law Enforcement Center because of the courts. The second floor at Trosper Hoyt, no weapons on the second floor. That's on page 7. We are responsible for enforcing this order, which is on page 10, by developing and implementing a screening and inspection protocol, while placing signs and stickers at entry points, relying on judges, lawyers, and parties to alert us if they have a reasonable belief that someone has a weapon, or all reasonable steps to take in helping to secure these areas. The only way to enforce the order in a manner that is likely to keep weapons out of the building or off the designated floors is our physical presence. I'm going to ask you to think in the terms of the safety of the workers, because I've received a lot of calls and they're somewhat fearful of retaliation to come forward. They're nervous about the lifting of the ban. They're worried about the floors and how is that all going to work. I say the same to them. It concerns me. So I know we've beat this up for months, and really since 2014, this courthouse security is like a bad marriage. But it continues on. And the problem is, I don't think you're recognizing the order and the obligation that the sheriff has. The sheriff's duties are to follow the orders from the court. That's along with about 70 others. So you have made this issue all of a sudden roll onto the sheriff. And then now it's rolling onto the taxpayers. Because if you lift the ban, then we're going to have to increase the security measures that are necessary, and the costs are, well, as you know, I've sent you this. First page talks $945,000. Second is $850,000. Third is $560,000, and the last is $643,000. Some of those may be one-time costs, but regardless, it is very, very expensive to change the direction for the fact that you may just have a few that want to bring in the weapons. We would be better as county to keep the ban in place. And lastly, you could save more money if you took LEC and Trosper Hoyt and moved them all here. They'd all be under one roof. That might have one-time costs, but I'll guarantee you that those one-time costs wouldn't cost near as much as this costs yearly. So my hope is that what I'm saying doesn't fall on deaf ears, that you set aside your original thoughts and look at this as too cost prohibitive to the citizens of Woodbury County. Because it is. For a few. And most of the people I talk to, staunch Second Amendment supporters, believe this, that if the sheriff is protecting the inside of the building, they do not need their weapon. And so I applaud people like that who take the time to come up and talk to me, as I'm sure they have talked to you about different things. I'm just asking that you would understand the difficulty that is involved and the necessary personnel that it would cost to run it. Can't do it part-time. I can't find 28 part-time people. That's not feasible. I think the judge has done a great job in crafting this order as best he could with the difficulty that comes into place. I just want to make this clear. It is not the judge's fault. It is really no one's fault, but it lies on your lap. I would ask you to walk it back and say that there should be a ban on weapons in the courthouse. They do not belong here. They do not belong on the second floor of Trosper Hoyt, and they do not belong in the law enforcement center. So I encourage you to look at those possibilities. The fifth one wasn't on there, and that is moving the courts all into one building. I think that would save you a tremendous amount of money. Might be some up front. But the only way that we can make this work is by having a ban in place. Because we're going to escort people to make sure they don't get off on the wrong floor, because otherwise they're subject to arrest. We want to make sure that they go where they're supposed to go. I can't hope that a video camera would show looks like they're on the third floor now. That doesn't work. So they need to be escorted by someone while they're in this building for their safety and for the protection of everybody here. So I'm really not going to beat this horse anymore. I'm just going to ask you to look at this, tell me what you think and what we can do to make this work. I'm sure there's people here that would like to talk about it for and against. So I'll leave that up to you. Do you have any questions?
Mr. Taylor?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sheriff. So I appreciate the position that you're in. And I appreciate being able to talk to you about this publicly and privately. The thing that I want to make sure that is understood is that you are, by these proposals, you are adding electronic monitoring and screening to the Trosper Hoyt building. You are adding electronic monitoring and screening to the law enforcement center. That has not had that in the history of Woodbury County.
That's correct.
Okay. And one of the things that I want to just make sure that we're all on the same page about is the board took action based on Judge Katie's order that was in turn amended by Judge Hoffmeyer's order, that my understanding as related to those two buildings was identical. And so I guess my general question that I'd like to ask Judge Hoffmeyer is, if that's the case for the law enforcement center and for Trosper Hoyt, that nothing's changed, one might look at this and say, well, we're adding electronic monitoring and screening in a way that Woodbury County never has, at a cost that seems to the taxpayer a sticker shock of almost $1 million, but the order hasn't changed as it relates to those two buildings. So when people look at this and say, well, look at what the Board of Supervisors feels, at least I'll just speak for myself, compelled by some poorly written legislation, but legislation nonetheless, this cost seems to affect two other buildings that, as far as I know, have not changed in the language of the order. So I just wanted to see if that's a fair characterization or not.
Well, it is a fair characterization, but here's the rub. I'm not sure in the last order and that it said that there would be scanning and what was the other term? Scanning and screening of those, but it does now. If it did, we missed it. But I think also that the judge isn't going to tell us how to do our job. He's merely going to lay out a template that how it should be done and leaves it to the sheriff.
And I guess my follow-on, thank you very much for that, appreciate that, would be to ask if we could ask of Judge Hoffmeyer for any clarification of the order, because I was appreciative, and you can tell me if I'm wrong in this characterization, that if not compelled by the order, and if the order is identical to what it was before, then these costs that are being quoted may not be necessary, because you would not otherwise be compelled to do so by an order. So I think it hinges on that in some ways.
Okay, so my lack of law school and yours.
Yeah, no, I admit
we'll leave
it.
it to the judge, but here's my thoughts. I do not know, and my attorney's thoughts, I do not know how we protect the courts in the courthouse and not the courts in the LEC and Trosper Hoyt. They are the courts. So in our opinion, the order says that these are deemed necessary or held for the sheriff to do it. Liability-wise, that's why I'm doing it. Mm-hmm. You want to assume the liability, that's fine. But it's still on the sheriff, because that order doesn't say. If the judge rescinds it and changes it, then we'll go by what the order says. I have told you before, I have to go by orders from the court, sure. And I think we all agree. Yep. And so the judge has that discretion, and I trust his judgment in whatever he tells me to do.
Well, with that, could we ask the Honorable Judge Hoffmeyer to give us any clarification?
Dwayne Hoffmeyer, Chief Judge of the 3rd Judicial District and the author of the order that is the subject of today's discussion, also authored a similar order before that. I've heard a number of news accounts that I think contain gross errors in what has taken place. I think the record should show that probably most prior, maybe Mr. Ung was on prior boards when court security first came into the courthouse. And that was something we had asked for, the judicial branch, for years and years. And we were pleased when that took place. Then there has been, since that time, 2 actions that this board has taken. First, when you allowed employees to conceal and carry, including those employees that work here in the Woodbury County Courthouse. Then there was 2 Supreme Court orders that affected court security and that there should not be guns in courthouses. That led to my first order where, regarding the courthouse, I found that we had the majority of the employees in this building. We constituted or had a presence on the majority of the floors, and so there should not be guns or even concealed carry in the courthouse. The Supreme Court then issued a later order that said that as a compromise, I think, for many small county courthouses, that if you, the Board of Supervisors, want to take legal responsibility for maintaining security in these public areas, that if you made that request, I was obligated to grant it. So that request has been made by you, and I granted it in this most recent order. And that's why you get some of the hodgepodge, because what it does not change from the Supreme Court order or from my order is in the court-controlled spaces, there cannot be firearms. And so the sheriff is absolutely right. You know, there's no firearms permitted in the court-controlled spaces, but yet there can be concealed carry in the public areas of this courthouse. My order did not change at all regarding the law enforcement center, and it did not change at all regarding Trosper Hoyt. Would I like to have screening at those places? Absolutely. I mean, it's wonderful. But we also know that the supervisor sets the budget for that. I think these orders have exposed the liability that may happen if bad things happen, and who's going to carry that burden. I think the sheriff is recognizing that in making his request that he can avoid liability if he does these screening devices at the 3 buildings. But otherwise, you know, the Board of Supervisors is responsible for the liability in the public areas, and the sheriff is legally obligated under the Iowa Code to provide security for the court system. So that's the dilemma of what has happened, and why when the public sees these orders of, yes, you can have a concealed carry on half of the main floor, but not on 2nd, 3rd, and 4th, and these different areas. I think you know, it is what it is, and I'm sympathetic to the sheriff's spot. I have not ordered any specific installation of any security equipment. My legal advice has always been is that that is the sheriff's responsibility. It is his area of expertise, and he has to do the best he can with what this board allows him to do. I was told at the last Court Security Committee, a meeting of which I'm a member, that when the Board of Supervisors opted for that your liability premiums went down, or they thought they went down because of that. I asked and whether they had gone back up, or if there had been any change because of the allowing of employees to conceal carry or the public, and that was an unknown factor, or may not be known for, you know, whenever the premiums or a risk assessment comes due. I do have to concur with the sheriff that I do believe that it is less safe in both work conditions and for jurors and victims, and it has made the sheriff's legal duty more difficult, and without a doubt there'll be some cost if there's just an additional person that has to escort people around, so we can ensure that that there are no problems with that. So that, I hope, understands the difference between the orders and explains at least where I'm coming from and what I think my order says. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Judge, is your order regarding those 2 buildings, and I apologize if you already answered this, but is it identical regarding the law enforcement center in Trosper Hoyt?
I already answered that, and it is identical.
Okay. And so my confusion as a supervisor is if the sheriff says we have to follow the order, but a previous order as related to those 2 buildings is exactly identical.
Supervisor, I've already said my order does not require anything specific. He has to do what he needs to do within his budget. For him to avoid liability, that's the best case scenario. Personally, I doubt you're going to give him those sorts of funds, so he'll have to go and do the best that he can. We've worked with him in the past. We have electronic monitoring folks that are in the area of 2nd floor of the Trosper Hoyt building. We have the sheriff's office and jail in close proximity in the Trosper Hoyt building. Those have been the compromises, if you want to call it that have been reached, and those are what I expected would continue. But again, The liability issue is what is, I think, I think you've heard him say that's what prompting this issue. And so if something were to happen in those two buildings, he could say he made a good faith effort, and the Board of Supervisors opted not to do that. So I think that's where we're at.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
I have a question too. The delineation, things like juvenile transfer and something else, like LEC, some other law over here, what was it out of convenience for location? Would it be wise, I think, in general, like you had said, in the long run, it would probably save us money to move the valet here for the different court cases?
You're talking about the suggestion of putting us all under one roof?
Correct.
Okay. Would love it. I don't know how we can accomplish that. It has historically been two buildings. When I first got to town, there was the municipal building, and that's where all of what the law enforcement option court functions took place there. They never were in the same, during my time, in 82 forward, they were never in the same building. The difficulty I think that we have is just trying to find an office was difficult for Judge Ackerman, is how would we move 4 courtrooms into this building, especially when it's an historical building. I think that's the biggest obstacle is you could try to maybe put something together, but there's, I remember the dilemma we went through just to try to get part of a rail cut off so a wheelchair could get through into a witness area, and I just don't envision that as probable. But it would be something.
At least to 2 buildings, though. I don't know. The LEC, I don't know where the room is. We have a little conference room over there, but I don't know how big spaces you have over at Trosper.
I think part of it comes from the convenience of where juvenile detention is at and the transportation that only has to take place from floors. It also takes place in the law enforcement center because all of the initial appearances and arraignments take place there when the jail is in close proximity. And if you were to start moving some of those court functions, then you may incur some additional costs in having to move people or look at video or some other options like that. So I just don't see us currently having the space in the courthouse to accommodate that. And it's something where ideally you'd probably want to put it on the main floor where most of the traffic is, to keep them from going up and down. And I just don't think we could do that, and we didn't have to move the clerk of court's offices again. So great idea. There were some plans, when there was a new building or a jail being built that had some of those features, but nothing came of that. Anything else I can answer? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Are we waiting for a motion? According to, I have a question for the judge. How difficult would it be in your eyes to maintain the weapons ban that was, say, 6 months ago? Would you be content with that?
If your question to me is if your I call it the opt-out vote was set aside and I was allowed to issue an order saying no weapons in the Woodbury County Courthouse, would I do that? Yes, I would do that. I mean, I think I had legal authority to do that, and this most recent action was a result of what the Chief Justice told me I should do and your request, which I honored.
So basically, I'm asking if you got the motion to leave it as it was, say 6 months ago, leaving Trosper Hoyt and the LEC out of it, would you sign that?
Yes.
Thank you. Sir?
This is a discussion point, not so much a question for the judge. The thing that I have trouble with in this is if that was the case, would the request and the cost go away? And I think that the answer would be sure, because look, by virtue of the Board of Supervisors passing this, it's going to cost almost $1 million. But then that can't be the case, because the Trosper Hoyt building and the Law Enforcement Center would have the exact same status that they do right now, that they did under the first order. And so my confusion is, let's say, theoretically, that the Board of Supervisors took that action. What has changed then on those other two buildings other than a request to add security that Woodbury County has never had? And I have it 2 years ago, 4 years ago, or 100 years ago. And so my question is, does the nearly $1 million cost of what the board has supposedly incurred by lifting a ban in certain areas become only because that cost actually has to do with two other buildings that were unrelated to the action that the board took here, as evidenced by the exact same order regarding those two buildings? It's just a question.
Well, if you keep the ban in this building, there's no cost.
Well, why would there not be still a cost in the other two buildings, and what does this ban or having certain areas have to do with the request that the public's heard is going to cost $650,000 or $900,000?
Because the judges I'm not sure, but maybe I didn't hear it right, but maybe they'll change that order on the other buildings.
But the order's the same as it was before. I mean, when the first...
You have asked now for, I never followed your order, remember?
No, I'm talking about the judge's order has not changed regarding the other two buildings. In other words, when the order first came,
right,
and you said, I have to follow a judge's order,
right,
you didn't ask for additional security at the LAC
right,
and Trosper Hoyt.
Did not.
But since we've amended the Woodbury County Courthouse, you said to the public, this is going to cost added security at those other two buildings. Well, the judge has clearly substantiated that he didn't change the order.
Right.
And so I guess that's my confusion, is it almost feels like if you will do this to this building, the request for those other two buildings will be dropped, and then people won't think that it's costing $1 million by what you did. Well, the order hasn't changed. So that's my difficulty.
I mean, so here's where we get the splitting hairs. You know, I can say, hey, Jeremy, you're like a spin doctor here. I mean, but no, think about it. Because I'm saying that the way we read the order, the way our attorney reads the order, is that something still needs to be done in those other buildings. I can't get over that. Though it wasn't done before, I get that.
Right, but Sheriff, you have to admit there was a first order that's exactly the same in which this funding request didn't come forward.
Exactly right. And we held the ban here, okay? And right, we did not, because we were hoping to look into the future.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm not arguing that.
Okay.
It's just that it's hard for me, as just a sheriff, to figure out how one court is different than the other courts, okay? And so just let me say this, and I want it to come out however it comes out. The sheriff isn't going to be held liable if something happens in those other buildings, okay? And Jeremy Taylor may be gone in 2 years. Who knows? Dave Drew may be gone in 2 years. But I'm not going to risk, those judges are just as important as every judge in this building and in the Trosper Hoyt. And they need protection. We have difficult cases that go on. And by us just hoping is a bad way to police, a bad way to be doing business. And so I get where you're at. But this whole thing, I'm telling you, wasn't born with this guy right here. Okay? It was born with you guys all here trying to make sure that the guns were allowed. I've said forever, bad idea. You can agree my idea is bad. But the point is, when the lawsuit comes down, it comes down Woodbury County and the sheriff, and he's named, and here I'm stuck. Okay? So I'm just telling you, as board members, the obligation I have, and you have an obligation to finance it. And if you can't, then it's incumbent upon the sheriff to figure out how he's going to do it. Do I cut services? So do I take the civil service or the civil papers that we serve and not do original notices, let all the attorneys know sheriff's not obligated, so he's not going to do original notices, cut back and invest, and do all those things? I'm stretched as far as I can go. Or do I just authorize overtime and know that that isn't something that can be denied? And then I just start checking with the Sioux City Police Department and Sheriff's Office and see if I can pay them $35 an hour to sit in front of these buildings till we can come up with a budget. That's where I'm at. I don't want to do this. So we could all make it easier if we just keep the ban and somehow we work with the judge and get an order that those other buildings are off limits. But at this point in time, I don't think that's going to happen, because I don't think a judge is going to tell you that those buildings are off limits. I might be wrong. I know he said it, but I don't know. Is he going to? Listen, I'm not putting the words in the judge's mouth, okay? I am just here to say this. The way we read that order, the way I've been instructed to handle it, is those buildings still require it because they are courts. And I'm not the smartest guy in the room, as some of you are. So I'm just going to go by with what I read. I think there's people that here want to speak for or against, and they ought to be allowed. So thank you.
Two things, Pat. Do we have to, or do we need to let the public speak on this since?
Just one last thing. 8 months ago, they're saying to me that order had nothing to do with those other buildings.
Same order.
It's just, I think we've asked the judge, and the judge has said,
Yeah, let Major Winker talk.
Prior to all this, 20 Winker Sheriff's Office, we were operating under a court order. We were operating under a weapons ban for the Woodbury County Courthouse. In our courthouse security meetings, we'd all have our big discussions and talk about, we recognize second floor, Trosper Hoyt, and LEC are trouble spots, but we don't have the money to do it. There was no order telling us to screen. Right, the two orders may be exact. Those orders came into place 6 months ago. So if we go back to the day before any orders were written, now we got to figure out a way to fund second floor and LEC and make it safer. We're not operating under an order.
But I guess my point, and I'll make this again, you were 6 months ago and it didn't cost almost $1 million. And it's the same exact order related to those two buildings. And so if it was at that time, we should have had a request. And I get it. I understand that there's courts over there as there are courts here, and that's been the situation from long before the time that we were on this board. But I want to make sure that the public understands that when your actions cost $1 million, which is what I think the judge was referring to as the gross media report, that's not true. Okay. You may feel obligated to do so, and I appreciate that position, but I just want to call a spade and just say if I don't get it.
In all the years, Todd Wick, Sheriff's Office, in all the years that we have attended the building security meetings, the Sheriff's Office has always advocated for security for those buildings. We haven't had to follow a court order up until 6 months ago. There was no court order that we.
And if you're saying 6 months ago, why didn't we come to you? That's an oversight on our part, because if we would have caught it, we would have, trust me, if we see a court order, we're going to comply with it. That was an oversight 6 months ago, not seeing the word screening. Because screening to us means somebody's there making sure that person doesn't have a firearm.
We recognize it now, and we need to correct it. Something needs to be done, because that order says that we are required to screen for weapons on the second floor of Trosper Hoyt, the LEC, and certain areas of this building that are identified in that order.
And I know what you're saying, Jeremy, about the first order, but my point is, don't go back. Go back 8 months. Go back to when 2 security officers on the front door, no weapons allowed in the courthouse. We weren't under a court order. We were just hoping and praying, like the sheriff said, for the best, that the wolf doesn't come to the second floor of the Trosper Hoyt.
because we can't fund the proper screening. But there was no court order directing us to do that. We all realize there's issues, but we also realize taxpayers, we got to figure out a way to fund it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, when did the citizens get to talk?
One second. Pat, since this is still a budget item, is the public allowed to speak at this?
Yes, you still operate under your rules that you have laid out on the agenda.
Okay, so you're telling me public input is not allowed at this point?
No, it is allowed.
Oh, it is allowed. Okay. Secondly, since we're past the 4:30 start time, should we wander through it? Since we don't have any set sales or any such thing, should we continue? Huh? Okay. We'll continue so we can take public input. Do we have any public input for or against? Sir, would you come up here to the podium? State your name and address, please.
William Burrows, 4409 47th Street in Leeds. And first of all, I'd like to start off by saying that with all due respect, Supervisor Taylor, I think you're just being difficult. You know, I've been here for an hour. These three gentlemen have not said a word. They're listening. And all you're doing is talking. And as a taxpayer, I guess I kind of resent that. You're splitting hairs. All right, so it's simple. No guns in the courthouse, ever, for any reason. I don't care how many people, how many services you bring into this building. No guns should be allowed. Now, I have been in touch with my representative and my state senator, my state representative, about getting the law changed. So I'm not picking on you guys. I'm approaching it from some other points of view. The other thing is, you're going to have a celebration here in May. People are going to be invited to come to this beautiful facility. I'm on the Historic Preservation Commission in the city. We've got people coming from Omaha that are interested in it, Sioux Falls. It's going to be a showcase. They're not going to want to come into an armed fortress just to see this place. So we got to have some common sense. The other thing is, this is on the National Historic Preservation list. Am I right, Kenny?
Yes.
Okay. So what does the National Park Service say about guns in places that are of national historic significance? I mean, is there something there that we could use to keep guns out of here? Anyway, how close am I on the 3 minutes? Anyway, I appreciate the opportunity to talk, but I would encourage you to support our sheriff and his staff and not let guns in the courthouse for any reason. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Any other folks with comments? At all? Sir.
I'm Kevin Keene, 2704 Nicholas Boulevard, Sioux City. I just want to say I also support what Mr. Burrows said. I support the sheriff. I don't like the idea of guns in the buildings at all. I don't know the details of all the things that we've discussed. I know it's more complicated than something real simple, but at the same time, I kind of go back to maybe it is pretty simple, just don't allow any guns. And I kind of come from the standpoint of cost. There's probably going to be a lot more cost if the guns are allowed. And so that's my take, and I just wanted to give my input that I support a ban on guns. Thank you.
Mr. Keene? Anyone else? Well, speaking as a board member, I have yet to find someone that is in favor of allowing firearms in the courthouse. I understand what the law says, but I've come to understand that we as the board can also advocate and press for the weapons ban to be reinstated. Personally, I don't have the stomach for $600,000 to $900,000. I'm not in favor of spending any extra money on this. I would be in favor of reinstating the weapons ban and let the chips fall where they may. Any other comments? I will make a motion to ask the judge.
Dwayne Hoffmeyer, Chief Judge, hearing your comments, and I omitted one of the historical. When this first started, it was the Woodbury County Board of Supervisors resolution of no firearms. And so before you get too far along, I don't know, or if you need to clarify whether that's what you're talking about, or if you're talking about your willingness for an administrative order to be entered. I think those are different, and I wasn't quite certain which direction you were headed, and I couldn't recall when some of those initial conversations took place on the when it was the supervisor's ban that was the controlling document when they first started. So depending where you go, those are two options, and I'm not certain which one you were headed down. So,
thank you.
okay.
I would make a motion to ask the Chief Judge Hoffmeyer to write an administration order reinstating the weapons ban.
Is that something that we can take action on today?
Mr. Woodman? Mr. Jennings, is that something we can take action on tonight?
I don't think so, but I think to me it caused me some concerns because of the way that you stated that comment. It wouldn't be the judges reinstating the gun ban. It would be the Board of Supervisors reinstating the gun ban.
So you're answering me that we can't do this action tonight?
Correct.
Okay. Do we need a motion to table this then until a later date? And I think time is of the essence because of our budget certification.
The publication date is, we have to have this done by next Tuesday. Next Tuesday is our last date. We can do this. I have to put together, get it to the rural papers because they require a week ahead of time. Our public hearing will be March 13th. You can put it in, the request, and you can take it back out March 13th. That's something the board's got to decide, do they want to put it in at whatever dollar amount and with the option of taking it back out March 13th? Or do you want to vote on next Tuesday? The Tuesday is our deadline for publication.
Mr. Chair?
Sure.
Given your previously stated conflict of interest, would you intend to vote on this motion?
I would.
PJ or Joshua, would you recommend that?
The question was, since I have abstained in the past, should I abstain on this vote?
Yes.
I would not.
Well, clearly, seeing as we can take no action today, either for or against, on that specific issue, my recommendation would be we would not. And then I'm not prepared to take up any of the electronic security screening of 2 other buildings today. So I would move we table this till at least next week.
I will second the motion by Taylor to table this until February 20th. Any other discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. We're a little late, but we're going to call this meeting to order. Please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please join me in a moment of silence. Thank you very much. Please silence your cell phones, pagers, electronic devices. Mr. Taylor, did you want to start with anything?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
So this item is under citizen concerns, and I was asked by Sergeant Bluff's mayor, John Winkle, to read this, and then I have some further response regarding some assertions that were made in the paper from the mayor of Sioux City. So this is Mayor Winkle, and he wrote, "I am out of town, or I would have been attending in person. First, as the mayor of the second largest city in Woodbury County, I reviewed and vetted all options that were discussed for EMS solutions. I feel that the option chosen by the board is the best and fairest in every aspect. Second, as a mayor, a lifelong resident, and a longtime business person in Siouxland, I'm disappointed in the Tax Research Conference for not taking the time to gather both sides of the issue before taking a position. The Tax Research Conference is a valuable member of the Siouxland area, and actions like this will cause it to be more and more irrelevant and less valuable over time." Mayor John Winkle's words, not my own. Wanted to just draw your attention to a couple of concerns and response. And first, very quickly, is there's a minimal cost for paramedic coverage. We were asked to, of course, tax on Sioux City's behalf by over $524,000 and split this fairly between general basic and rural basic. And the cost on a $100,000 valuation to a Sioux City taxpayer is $2.79 to cover 875 square miles. Whether you're driving down the I-29 corridor in conservation cabins, eating out in Anthem, farming outside of the city, or visiting the county fair. The next slide shows there is no tax increase. The Board of Supervisors voted 5-0 to do this without a tax increase because we deauthorized other positions. And so there is no increase to taxes in Sioux City, nor in any other area. The next slide shows there is a comment, and I believe that DRC in the future may walk this back or amend it, but the rural basic levy only applies to 8,238 people. Those are in townships, not in any incorporated area. So no one in any of these cities, if we were to use rural basic, would ever pay for paramedic coverage. It would only be your townships, which doesn't make any sense because somebody who lives in Anthem or Cushing would never pay for this, but a farmer a mile outside of either one would. And so to bear the burden of covering 875 square miles in the unincorporated areas makes no sense. There's no legal means. You can kind of carve up a way that you wish that we could tax, but it's general basic or rural basic. And I want to add this, rural basic taxpayers pay both. And so that's important to understand. The next slide in response is this. There was a suggestion, and I want to make sure this is clear. The top counties in population fund $0 from rural basic for those services. So I suggest looking at Lynn, Story, Polk, Blackhawk, Johnson, and Scott, and you won't find this. except our plan does do so because we thought it fair to tax 50-50 from rural basic and general basic. One of the assertions that was made by the mayor is this: they keep moving deputies over to be funded by the general basic fund every time so they don't have to raise the rural levy. It's ridiculous. They need to stop. It's not true. Last 5 years since I've been on the board, that hasn't happened one time. And you can see, I had Dennis pull these numbers. You can see that that's just false. General basic uniform patrol has gone down from FY15 to FY19, and rural basic has actually gone up. So to say the opposite is misrepresenting it to the public. And so with that, just wanted to also, not that we need to get into all of this, but the percentages of uniform patrol from rural basic were one of the highest. You can see Johnson, Polk, Lynn, and Scott County don't have any from rural basic, and we're at those percentages. So I just thought it's important, as it was in our last discussion, to make sure that we're using accurate facts and figures, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Do you have possession of a letter from John Winkle?
I have an electronic communication. Is that something that I can otherwise send to you?
Yes.
Okay, I will do so. Thank you. I would move to receive the comments from Mayor John Winkle.
I will second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you. Mr. Goodman.
Just wanted to comment on, I thought I cleared it up with Jeremy, that's not what we meant. Been going through 600 pages of budgets the last 2 weeks. I sent Brett the wrong copy, but I thought I cleared that up with you, but I obviously didn't. And on Mayor Winkle's part, it's correct I didn't talk to him, but Dennis and I sat down and he gave me the 10 county sheet before it was presented here on Monday, so just presented what my board thought. I don't think it's a fair assertion to say we only took one side, so, and when we cleared up that, I don't know why that's in this packet. I thought we cleared it up. We can't get something printed in the journal in one day, and just wanted to say that. Thanks.
Mr. Miller, what was your comment?
Those were Winkle's words, not his. Those were.
Hello, everybody. Brian Miller, 7004 Morningside Avenue. I just wanted to real quick tell all of you thank you for working this issue. This is a really near and dear to my heart thing. My boy, his wife, and my 2 young grandchildren live out in the middle of nowhere, Woodbury County. And the fact that you've been working on this issue, I know it's a lot of work and the staff. I just want to tell you personally, thank you very much for working this issue. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you, sir. Mr.
I also caught the mayor's letter and going to raise my eyebrows with the perceived concern on our part for raising the rural levy, especially this year when it's been reduced dramatically. So found that especially interesting.
Well, if I might offer, I think sometimes it's a sore spot and hits that nerve that we keep, to your point, Mr. Goodwin, we keep getting bashed and we don't get the opportunity to get our points out publicly sometimes in short order either. This is not an attack or any such. It's just a matter of, as public as we are, sometimes it seems like we don't get our point across and most often not accurately. And so to your point, thank you. Are we good with that? Sure.
Hand out a couple papers here.
Can you identify yourself, sir, and your address?
My name's Brent Nelson, 2900 Isabella Street, Sioux City, Iowa, 03. I I'd like to take a minute or two of your time to express some concerns I've had regarding the weapons screening process, the north door. I'd like to start out, if it's acceptable, by listing my concerns and then listing some maybe solutions that might help. But before I start, since things went really odd the last couple days, or last couple of weeks, I'd like to attorney's letter, and please note that I'm a private citizen in this. Yes, I work across the street, but I'm acting, or the alley, but I'm a private citizen. I'm a private person, not acting as a city employee or official. My statements regarding this are mine. They don't reflect any city policy, nor do they promote any city agenda. The city manager has nothing to do with this issue, nor with any objections to the billfold searches that I'm expressing concerns about. And any concerns regarding my comments should be aimed at me. They're mine. Somehow the city manager got brought into this, and I haven't figured that out yet. As I've said quite a few times, I will be the last person to object to running my phone and my tablet and my keys and my scanner and whatever, and my billfold, and as long as it's in my back pocket, through the walk-through X-ray machine, through the walk-through metal detector.
Can I ask you a question? Do you consider your phone and keys personal property?
Personal, yes. Private, no. Not in the same way that my billfold, the contents of my
Do you
billfold.
consider your wallet personal property?
Well, why do you ask?
Have you seen the judge's order on screening?
I have seen that, and I still believe I have the ability to speak out and object if it's okay with you.
I don't think you're going to get very far, but
Well,
you can.
That's fine. But may I speak?
You're up.
I honestly and I truly believe that those billfold searches are unjust. They're wrong. Frankly, law enforcement has no just cause to look inside my billfold and see what is in there. The dish, let me back up. What's in my billfold is private, and I think as all Americans we have a right to privacy in issues like that. If something in my billfold sets off the alarm, yeah, great, I'll open it up, anybody can view anything. But my credit cards, my memberships to various groups, they're nobody's business. They can't possibly be used as weapons. And there's nothing in there that's even close to metallic either. So, as I would ask that we consider whether these are essential to continue. Now, Sheriff Drews pointed out that no one searches through wallets. Well, I beg to differ. Mine has been, without any consent. He also likes to point out that anyone and everyone that enters the courthouse goes through the metal detector and the scanner. As you note on my attorney's letter, that's not true either. There's quite a few people pass through that without having their billfolds checked. You know, please review his letter. He has a better grasp of the English language than I do. Now, January 25th, while this issue was playing out, I received one of the attached emails from the sheriff, stating that after reviewing the enclosed video, your implications that we rummaged through your wallet is troubling to me, and so is your attitude. As public sector workers, I would expect that there would be a mutual understanding and benefit. And that's where we brought in the city manager. And after reviewing the video and the tone of your email, you're not allowed in the courthouse until I hear from your supervisor. I didn't realize I could get banished from the courthouse for having a bad attitude. And at any rate, I don't think I have a bad attitude. I worked with a lot of you and worked pretty well, and I don't think I've been a major league pain in anyone's rear end recently. If I have, let me know and I'll mend my ways. But this is more than just a petty hissing match between two people. Mr. Lidman, if you could maybe consider this, don't need to respond, but consider this. This board, like all boards, all commissions, all councils in the state of Iowa, operates under the Iowa Open Meetings Law. And if someone, well, in addition, State Code 21.4.1b notes that each meeting shall be held at a place reasonably accessible to the public. Well, if we have a sheriff running around banning people from the building that the meetings are being held in, are you absolutely sure you're meeting the requirements of the Open Meetings Law? It's a question I think you might want to consider. In no way at all am I suggesting that the board is doing anything wrong. I'm sure you're doing everything right. But nevertheless, there may be people who have need and right to speak that aren't getting a chance to because they get banned for something like a bad attitude. And the same, only more so, would apply to the administrative and non-judicial offices in the courthouse. You know, people that have done nothing wrong, and I haven't had a run-in with police since I was in college after a football game.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
People that have done nothing wrong really should be able to access the recorder's office and the auditor's office and the assessor's office and the other administrative offices and the board meetings.
Mr. Nelson, let me excuse myself for just a minute here. We typically allow 3 minutes per person for citizen concerns. Okay? Mr. Taylor, do you have a comment?
Yes, I just wanted to remind you of that fact. Appreciate your right to speak. Wonder if we should move to receive this, if that's something that we would be advised to do, and then we can digest this further, given the time constraints that we have. And then also wanted to see if our assistant county attorney would advise a non-response, given that this could be a matter of impending litigation. I'm not sure if it will be.
And I would be more than happy to meet with you after the meeting and discuss it.
I wouldn't. May I take, if I have 3 minutes, can I get credit for the time you were questioning my ability to speak?
We're well past that, sir, I am sure.
I'll move to receive.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Well, thank you for allowing me the right to speak.
Moving on. Any other citizen concerns? Approval of the agenda.
I'd move it.
I will second the motion by Mr. Taylor. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. Items 5 through 11 constitute a consent agenda of routine action items to be considered by one motion. Items pass unanimously unless a separate vote is requested by a board member. Item 5, approval of the minutes of the February 6th, 2018 meeting. Item 6, or did I say that? Item 6, approval of claims. 7, board administration, public bidder. Approval of notice of property sale resolution for parcel ending in 007, also known as 511 Center Street. setting the time for Tuesday, February 27th at 4:35. Item 8, County Recorder. Receive County Recorder's report of fees collected. Item 9, Human Resources. A, approval of memorandum of personnel transactions. B, approval of request to deauthorize county position. Item C, authorize to initiate the hiring process. 10 is secondary roads. Consideration of permit to work in the county right of way. And if I remember right, Mr. Nair, we had a comment. Would you like to address that now? Wasn't it something that was kind of run of the mill, but you wanted to explain it in case there were any questions?
Mark Nair, Woodbury County Engineer. I didn't know if this was a new item for the board or not. The permit to work in the right-of-way is to allow a bicycle race. This is the 5th annual Twin Bing race. It starts and finishes near our climbing facility. They can use that as their setup. They do provide a certificate of insurance. Sheriff's Department does provide some traffic control for this. Our county road department, we try and get out there and broom off the intersections in advance of the event. That's something we do as a matter of course every spring anyway. We recognize that we're putting sand down in winter for traction. In the spring, on a dry pavement, that's not such a good thing to have in place. So this isn't anything that creates additional work for us, but I didn't know if it would be one that the board might have questions on. It is a one-of-a-kind event for us. So.
But nothing that's completely out of the ordinary or unusual.
Maybe we would want to designate that the engineer go along with the bike race just to ensure, utmost customer service for
the engineer's racing day. I used to race in these, but my racing days are over, I'm afraid.
So are there any questions that anybody on the board would like to set this aside and discuss further?
I just want to be sure I was available in case this was questioned. It is unusual in the scope of this type of work.
Thanks, Mark. Item 11, Community Economic Development. Item 11A, approval of request to apply for Professional Developers of Iowa Scholarship. B, approval of request to apply for Mid-American Energy Local Partners Scholarship. And C, approval of request to apply for Mid-American Energy Local Partners Grant. I will move to accept. Sorry, Mr. Butler.
I missed a 9C. The action you took today will reduce next year's fiscal year budget by $58,268. So I'll make the adjustments.
I'd like to thank the county treasurer for that.
Yes. So that comes down.
Credit given where credit is due.
He is back here, isn't he? Anyway, just to let you know, that did reduce our tax asking and rates a little bit.
I will move to accept the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by DeWitt, second by Taylor. Any other questions? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 4-0. The end of consent agenda. Item 12, County Sheriff Public Hearing, third reading and approval and adoption of county ordinance allowing Woodbury County Sheriff's Office to waive residency requirements for reserve peace officers.
Todd Wick, Sheriff's Office.
So moved.
Pardon me?
So moved.
I will second the motion by Ung. Any
Just
other
to-
questions or comments?
Just to clarify, we need to
close the public hearing.
officially open the public hearing and then close it.
That got us last week.
We need to open this for public hearing.
Hearing none, Mr. Chair, I move that the public hearing be closed.
I will second. Ung seconds that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say nay. Passes 4-0.
Thank you. I'll move the requested motion.
Mr. Ung will move it. Mr. DeWitt will second that. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Thank you, Major Wick.
Thank you for everything.
Thanks, Joshua.
Item 13, Building Services, approval of rotunda decorative plaster restoration in the amount of $25,800.
The item before you is an action item to repair some of the rotunda decorative plaster. Specifically, we have some areas, actually several areas, about a dozen, where the plaster is flaking and falling away. Specifically, there's a couple of areas over the stairs that go from first to second floor. And there's also an area down on first floor where the ceiling is cracked near the clerk's area. We have the centennial, 100th anniversary centennial coming up in May, and we'd like to get these repairs funded and taken care of before that time.
So you want to have them do this stuff here too?
Well, we'd like to, but maybe we can handle some of this in building services.
I say I'll come down and paint it with you there.
I think we can do that.
Oh, okay.
I'll move it for discussion.
Second.
I just want to let it be known, my old man and I used to have a Taylor painting company, and this is not the same one. So
that is correct.
Just in case anybody thought that we were moonlighting.
We got a motion and a second. Motion by, I'm sorry, who was it? Taylor, and you second it?
I did. Tie. You can break it.
Mr. Young can take the second. Any other questions for Kenny on this?
How many bids were?
We did get several bids on this, and actually we did receive a lower bid on this of around $18,000 and some odd dollars. We did not take the lower bid. The reason is I wasn't confident that the company that submitted the bid could handle the job in the fashion that's appropriate for this courthouse.
Kenny, is there any sort of protective layer when these are, restored? Or, I mean, I'm asking, once they crack and pieces fall off, does the decay accelerate or not?
That's a good question, and it seems to, yes. It seems that once the flaking starts or the pieces start crumbling away, that it starts to accelerate. And a very good example of that is, again, above that stairway that we have going to second floor. Over the past year, our janitorial crew has almost cleaned up nightly a powdery residue that keeps flaking away from that, whereas probably 2 years ago it wasn't a nightly occurrence.
Mm-hmm.
We got a motion and a second, right? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say nay. Passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kenny. Item 14, secondary roads. Consider a resolution for the commitment of funds and project management for MPO funding applications.
My department is submitting a request for funding to the MPO for the extension of Port Neal Road improvements. Port Neal Road, as you probably remember, from 225th Street down to roughly the rest area was improved by the city. That's the limits of the city right now is up to the southbound rest area, south property line. The portion on the west side of the road is still all rural Woodbury County. But beginning at the project, where the project from the city left off, down to the north end of the Gelita property is where this project is proposed to replace the current 6-inch pavement with roughly 6 inches of asphalt overlay on it, widen the shoulders out to 8 foot, and actually build this road up for a good industrial section. This work is proposed to be in conjunction with eventual work that will take place, assuming we get an interchange in that area, area between exit 135 and 140. Regardless of the interchange, this is still necessary to serve the businesses down there. But the timing of this project now in fiscal year 2022 will allow us to coordinate if an interchange does prove to be a viable project for the county. Last year, this project was partially funded. The MPO gave us $708,000. Our total request was 80% of the project cost, which would be $2.125 million. So we're requesting the additional amount this year from the region, or from the MPO.
I'd move it.
Second.
Motion by Taylor, second by Mr. Radig. Any other?
Just a question, I know this is somewhat unrelated, but currently the status of the interchange that was aforementioned seems like it is more doubtful than otherwise, and I'm just wondering, do you have any idea of next steps in either what we're doing?
The current thing that our consultant is working on is questions that were raised when the region gave us a copy of the traffic study. There were 3 anomalies identified by our consultant with that traffic study. They're scheduled to meet with the Department of Transportation to go over those issues. Part of the question, and I think the biggest question, was the allocation of traffic to the new Seabourn Triumph Road that's being built along the airport. It appeared as if the traffic there was significantly less than was anticipated when that project was submitted for RISE money by the city. Okay. We wanted to make sure that the amount of traffic allocated to that location is in keeping with what is anticipated with the design work out there. Since we don't have a facility in place, since we do have traffic projections out there, we want to make sure that those traffic projections are reflected in the model. And where that's important is in determining the traffic that's at the current airport and Singing Hills interchanges. If those 2 interchanges, if the traffic is getting near capacity, where we don't have extreme delays or backups onto the interstate, but if they're handling traffic, that would mean any traffic growth could help justify the addition of a new interchange on the south side.
When do you anticipate that next step kind of timeline being? Just because, you know,
it
was before the
2 to 3 weeks we'll
okay.
have that answer from DOT, and then we'll be having another stakeholders meeting.
Okay.
It's my hope that as we look toward April, that might be the public hearing for the outcome of the study.
Okay.
That's my hope and our anticipated timetable at this time that the consultants are working toward.
Very good. Sorry to get off on a tangent.
No, that's all right.
I appreciate it.
You really should have an update anyway, because we haven't had a stakeholders meeting, I think, since November.
Right.
Right now we're at 4 months without a lot of information. It took about 2 months to get the traffic model, and then it's taken about the last 3 weeks for our consultant to evaluate that model.
Thanks, Mark.
Okay, I'm lost again. Did we have a motion on that yet?
Yep. We had a motion and a second.
Okay.
To approve the resolution.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Pass 4-0. Thank you, Mark.
This requires the signature of the auditor as well. Thank you very much.
Item 15 is reports on committee meetings.
Yes. Sure. Sure. I attended a Security Institute meeting with yourself. Major updates. Text to 911 is going smoothly. Process began several months ago, getting more and more utilization. Our current coordinator, Ms. Socknat, is off on leave of absence, so we appreciate several people standing in and assisting those daily operations of the Emergency Operations Center are fulfilled, and those include Major Wick, Lieutenant Armstrong, Lieutenant Hertz, and Sioux City Fire Rescue Captain Tom Standish. That's important to note that the teamwork is allowing that smooth operation, and there are a lot of responsibilities to fill. That's all I have.
Pretty much second that. Mr. Taylor?
Another really good historic committee meeting. Thank you to Supervisor Ung for good work on the website. Looks like it'll be same county homepage with the /100, and we will anticipate publishing a schedule of the events for May 1st through 5th with a lot of great speakers to potentially include Guy Wilson and Tim Samuelson, who are sort of the rock stars of historic architecture from the University of Virginia in Chicago. And my favorite quote was this: Tim Samuelson. He's a historian who some say is the only good thing about Chicago government. That was from the Chicago Tribune. So, should be a great 5-day celebration and continue to work on it. That's all I got.
Mr. Reddick? No other reports? Any citizen concerns?
I'd like to bring you up to speed on, in case you start hearing things. We are looking at a major change in software, and it'll be a big job if we go that way. But we have been in contact with a software company that the two assessors' office use. And the reason this has come about is that each year that we have the audit is reported to us, they have I believe it's called a reportable condition. But anyway, the issue is that we have several different softwares that we use. We use Solutions, Tyler, HT, and some homegrown stuff that we do, and honestly it's a bear. The auditor has been complaining about it for several years that he has to do work that actually the county should be doing when they come to do the work, when they come to do the audit. And it is costing us more as far as when they do the audit, the amount of time that they have to place in that when they do that. But the real concern is from the federal government is that they don't like the way that when they read those audits, there are concerns that are expressed by our auditor that the information isn't real good that they're getting from that. And so I believe we're going to be placed on, what is it, high risk? Is that what
There's a potential that we could be placed on a high-risk category when it comes to receiving federal grants. We have responded to the Department of Justice probably 2 to 3 times within the last year or so. The last response was requested by, I believe, February 2nd, which we complied. We've been sharing all of our information with the independent auditor. He's approved of what we're sending. He said there's not much more we can do. We're all working on different software platforms, and right now we're not at the point that we can change that finding until we change the way that we're functioning. So we haven't heard back from the Department of Justice yet, but they did say that if we did not satisfy them with this set of responses, that we could be placed on high risk category. What that means, I can't tell you at this time, but as soon as we hear back from them, we'll know more.
So that involves, we don't know what that means. We're going to we'll talk to the county attorney's office too, whether we have to do an RFP for this process, but we're investigating it right now. We aren't talking prices or anything else, but we're trying to get an idea of how big a job this is. And from what we're seeing is that it's going to be a very large job in order to get that done. And the reason I wanted to bring it to you is so that when you start hearing things that you have kind of an idea what they're talking about. But also it has the potential is that to cause a rub with the city of Sioux City also because of the shared IT department that we have. It may impact some of the costs. It may impact the way that we share information back and forth because the city is also on HTE, and we thought it was a good thing to be as far as the financials to be on that because the IT department would be very experienced with dealing with that. But then when we have the treasurer's on one software, the auditor's on another, and the assessors are on another. And so it's really difficult to pass that information back and forth between everybody. So it really behooves us to take this action to do that. And we just wanted to make sure that you're aware that there are a lot of potential pitfalls in the direction that we're headed, but we believe that we need to do that. And Honestly, a change in the treasurer's office has made us a little bit more receptive to making that change. So.
Costs?
We have no idea at this point.
I heard the rumor of ugly.
Yes, that's the potential, but that is something. It's going to be a very long-term process in order to get there, but it's something that we know has been out there, but we finally got people that are starting to take us serious, from the sheriff's department to the treasurer's department, and Mr. Butler, as far as the issues that have been raised when our audit has been brought to us.
Well, the cost isn't good news, but the process is, I mean, there's nothing better the county can do, in my opinion, to ensure its long-term financial stability than to ensure its systems run smoothly. And our system for a backup dentist is to turn the clock back and clone him, find out how we come up with our numbers, because it's not the best process. And I've been pushing for it since I was made aware of it for a couple of years, and I know it's a long road, but I guess I'm also curious, since this has been something that's been on our public radar as far as the audit for a few years. Have the feds just now, I can't, believe they just now noticed, or what sort of prodded a letter?
Right now, we're responding to the 2015 audit. So the letter that came to us from the 2015 audit, this started, I would say, around a year ago, maybe a little bit longer.
Okay.
Still trying to clear up the finding from the 2015 audit. The same information is in the 16 and the 17 audit, so I believe that there was a change in law in 2015 regarding grants, and I think that might be something to do with it, of why this all of a sudden has come out in that year.
Okay.
We have been talking about it for quite a while, but
well, you talk about the road with Sioux City, but they don't have the unique challenge we do of several elected heads in the different departments. So
the positive thing about it is, if we do go through this transition, since we do have a lot of manual spreadsheets and so forth, it makes it easier to transition this maybe in sections as opposing to have to do it all at once. So that may be something that we can kind of look into.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Any citizen concerns? And actually, I'd ask you to come back up. You want this to be on public record, correct?
Very much, sir.
Okay. Do you mind if I ask you some questions?
No.
And Rocky, before you do, given the fact that there's an attorney involved, and I haven't fully read everything that's been submitted, I would advise against doing that at this time, just given the nature of the situation and the possibility that there may be litigation.
Okay.
May I continue? I believe where I stopped off at, after I noted that such banishment was, in my opinion, had some questions with the open meetings law, and the same with the recorder's office and auditor's office, and those, I think, someone who, like me, who's never caused a problem, it doesn't seem right we should have to go through that level of a search to visit the recorder's office or the auditor's office. And up until, well, when Mr. Potterbaum was on was doing that. That was the protocol. Didn't get your bill filled out unless the alarm went off. Now, I'd like to suggest a couple of issues. One, I understand there's Courthouse Security Committee will hold a meeting of some sort sometime. Could you discuss whether it's absolutely necessary to do that? And granted, with the judge's ruling, there doesn't seem to be a lot of wiggle room. So the way around that, the way to address that, I would think, would be to consider moving some things out of the courthouse, perhaps board meetings like you do with smaller towns, so that people who didn't feel comfortable about that type of thing would not need to go through those. Moving some administrative functions, I know that's going to be a long time out. I know what your budget looks like, but over the years, you have to start giving some consideration to that sometime if we're going to be able to access administrative areas without those searches. And finally, I noted in the report, and my attorney did, that you do have the authority to censure the sheriff for banning people from the courthouse for a bad attitude. I'll leave that up to you, but it strikes me if that doesn't merit a censure, nothing would. I'm simply asking the board to consider these items. If you consider the items, compare them with your rapport with the voters. People have actually voted for you. I'd run for office, I'd be the first person to get a negative vote total. So if you consider those with your rapport with the council, or with the voters, and do what you think is appropriate, nobody can ask for more. But with all due respect, I think they're wrong. So thank you for listening to me.
You advised me to not make or ask questions. Can I make comments?
Come on, I'll answer, and I'll ask. I mean, it's.
I would advise against it. I mean, we've received the information at this point. I believe at least Mr. Taylor indicated earlier that he would want our office to kind of digest what's been submitted. So, I mean, you certainly could speak on your own behalf. I think at this time we're in a situation where we received the information, and it's probably best to leave it at that.
I really didn't intend for this to become a combative thing. I apologize. And thank you, Mr. Supervisor DeWitt, for giving me a chance to finish.
Just so you know, I'm one of the security officers as well.
Trust me, I know. That's why I typed up my friggin' comments rather than trying to read them off the cuff and probably get myself into worse trouble than I did. So, nevertheless, I believe they're wrong. So.
Noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other citizen concerns? Any board concerns? Sir?
Mr. Chair, just curious, do you know next week what you're thinking time-wise for the meeting? I know that's an off-the-cuff one.
What would you recommend, Dennis?
We actually don't have anything on the agenda except maybe some wrap-up things. I'm going to talk with Keith to make sure we get back to items that was brought up, be brought up in a wrap-up, and the courthouse security. Those are the only two issues.
Are you looking at a regular?
Would 4:30 be acceptable?
Would be to me. I don't.
Yeah, that's fine.
Any other input? What works for Mr. Taylor?
Well, I was thinking 4:18, but it doesn't matter. 4:30 is fine. A regular meeting is fine.
Mr. Rohn?
That works for me.
Let's shoot for 4:30 then. Normal time. We are adjourned.